Hello my buffalo, pikafan003 here, and today, another reaction video. Whoo! Yee. Yeah, I know, it wasn't that long since I posted my reaction to Fall of the Crystal Empire by Silly Philly Studios, but that one was actually recorded the day of its posting, and I was actually not able to upload it until the day that I did, because, you know, my computer's shit, and internet at my house sucks. But, other than that, continuation of A Somber Year. If you're wondering what's with the shoelace around my neck, it's because it's the new chain for my dog tags. Yes. I took off the chain I had on earlier because that turned my neck green. I also have a little reading buddy with me today. My favorite of the main six, not Rainbow Dash. Even though in my challenge to My Little Dashie, I showed you all the Dash stuff that I had. It's actually Fluttershy. So doll-worthy. Okay. Now, from where we left off, we are on chapter 6 of what is now currently 34. But I won't be reading fully through chapter 34 in this recording, but I will be getting to the end of this one day. So, without further process, let us read the warning for Chapter 6. This chapter will contain lemon between two evil ponies. You have been warned. Now, lemon, in this case, would be in the Brony fandom. If you read through the /MLP forum, it'd be known as spaghetti. So, okay, let's just get through this. Knock, knock. Mr. Rich, currently in a depressive state, sighed. He wasn't in the mood to answer the door. His daughter had been missing for almost an entire day. He was starting to get worried. He hasn't been this worried or depressive since his wife died after giving birth to their first foal. He heard a few knocks on the door, or on the hard oak doors, and groaned. I'm coming, he muttered as he lazily made his way over to the front door. Opening it, he was surprised to find the postal pony standing with a pink box wrapped in red ribbons beside him. Special delivery for Mr. Rich, the pony said before nudging the box to the stallion's hooves. Mr. Rich examined the present curiously and with a raised brow. Who's it from? He asked. It's anonymous, sir. Even I don't know, the pony said before turning around to leave. Mr. Rich stared at the box. It certainly wasn't his birthday, and wasn't even close to Diamond Tiara's. Curious, he undid the red ribbon around the box and removed the lid. Dot, dot, dot. So you're saying he fainted? Rainbow Dash asked slowly. Yeah, right on the spot, too, Applejack replied before taking a sip out of her drink. Even the postal pony who delivered the package almost fainted. Rainbow Dash shuddered. News of the package Mr. Rich received spread throughout Ponyville like wildfire. Not only that, but Silver Spoon's family also received a present containing the corpse of their daughter. There's already a rumor saying that the doctors might have to lock Silver Spoon's mother up in an asylum because she wouldn't stop screaming. The mere thought of someone killing two fillies in such a gruesome way was enough to shake Rainbow Dash to her core. For a pony to murder a filly was extreme taboo in all of Equestria, often leading up to severe punishments. Just who did it was the big question right now. Every pony in Ponyville is on high alert now, Applejack added. My big brother is beginning to consider waiting for Apple Bloom after school. I mean, Who the hay would murder a pair of innocent little fillies? It just makes me sick. The mare angrily slammed her hoof on the table. Rainbow Dash nodded. Even though Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon weren't exactly the best fillies in Ponyville, that didn't mean I wanted them to die. Not like that. She sipped her drink quietly. Another thought suddenly came to her mind as she looked over to Applejack dead straight in the eyes. Do you think King Sombra had something to do with this? Sorry if I'm fucking up on the words. I'm a little dyslexic. Applejack stayed silent for a minute as she pondered about the question. The thought of the Dark King going so far as to murder 2 fillies seemed certainly outlandish. For Pete's sake, even Discord and Nightmare Moon wouldn't do that. Queen Chrysalis maybe, but she would do so in order to feed her hive. And it isn't every day she would go out and kill just 2 fillies. She would take an entire schoolhouse if she had to. Just how evil could King Sombra get? It's more than likely, Dash, Applejack replied before she drank her drink. Rainbow Dash felt her right ear twitch and she growled softly to herself. Sombra. She would give anything to have that unicorn captured right about now. Captured or dead. Well, I gotta get going, Dash. I got some work to do this morning, or in the morning, Applejack said while standing up from her seat. See you later. See ya, AJ, Rainbow Dash replied. A few minutes later, she too left the bar and flew to her home in the clouds. The moonlight faintly lit up her room as she crawled into bed for the night. Yawning, she allowed the darkness of sleep to calm her, or claim her. Rainbow Dash found herself in a dark place. Not a building or pony in sight. Not even animals or plant life. Just a big, black, empty void. Hello? She called. Is any pony there? The only response she got was her echo. Rainbow Dash frowned and decided to take flight. After a few minutes of flying, she decided to land. Everywhere she went felt like one giant loop. Dashy? A familiar voice called. Rainbow Dash suddenly shot up in bed, panting, gripping her blanket tightly in both her hooves as she panted. She looked around and was glad to see herself in her room, but the voice, that lilting voice. Rainbow Dash felt tears start to brim her eyes as she sniffled. Ponies often saw her as brave and fearless, but when it came to confessing her feelings, she was a coward. She missed many opportunities that she could have told Twilight about her feelings toward her, fearing that the unicorn would shun her for even considering falling in love with another mare. Same-sex relationships were rare, but common in Equestria. But ponies with that sort of relationship mostly kept to themselves about it. Ponies often... Oh, no, I just read that one. I'm sorry. Rainbow Dash often allowed her pride to get the better of her because of the fear that she would get rejected. And what would their families think? What would their friends think? Would Celestia disown Twilight if she had a relationship with another mare? The last thing Rainbow Dash wanted was to be hated for the rest of her life. She knew how much being Celestia's student meant to Twilight. Looking back now, she wished she would have at least tried to talk to Twilight about it. Sort of hinted it toward her, but that chance was long gone. Rainbow Dash knew she wouldn't be able to find another pony like Twilight Sparkle, and it made her cry. ... Twilight placed the scissors on the edge of the sink. The long bangs covering her face had been trimmed to their original length. She could now see how much she changed in the years since she was captured. Her face was still the same, but her eyes, fur, and mane had grown much darker. Her horn was slightly curved and pointed at the end. She'd also grown slightly taller. These were things she was just starting to pay attention to. Water still dripped from her hair and body, falling onto the floor and sink. She used her normal magic to place the trimmed hair into the rubbish bin and the scissors back in the medicine cabinet. She took a few minutes to dry herself up and brush her long, dark mane. Her wings felt strange. It was a feeling she just started to get used to. She already taught herself how to fly. Her under surveillance supervision, that is. But it felt magnificent. Feeling the wind brush against her face made her feel like nothing could stop her. She couldn't wait for her next flight. When she finally left the bathroom, she found Sombra already waiting for her in bed, stripped of his armor. There's that thought for you. Don't you dare even think about it. Don't you dare make Fluttershy cry. If you make Fluttershy cry, I will find you and I will hurt you. Hello, dear, he purred. I see you've actually trimmed your bangs. My, it's so nice to see that beautiful face of yours. Twilight blushed shyly, crawling into bed and straddling her mate. Don't you dare! Don't you dare! Twilight placed both her front hooves on her husband's muscular chest, and the two shared a passionate kiss. Don't you dare, I said. Sombra wrapped one foreleg around her waist as the kiss deepened. Twilight moaned in the kiss as Sombra's tongue explored her wet cavern. Stop it! Stop it! Sombra, she moaned softly after breaking the kiss. When will I have my revenge against the ones who betrayed me? Her eyes glinted green when she spoke. Soon, my queen, Sombra replied as he gently ran a hoof down her long, silky mane, admiring the softness. You'll have your revenge soon enough. Twilight growled softly in disappointment. She yearned to have the blood of her so-called friends on her hooves, watching them take their last breath before her cold eyes as they begged for mercy. Oh, how she loved to hear her victims beg for their lives. It made her feel all the more powerful inside. She was going to hear a lot of it when she kills them. She might keep their heads as trophies and mount them in the throne room, or impale their heads on pikes as a reminder to those who dare try to betray her. She hated them. She hated them more than the torture she endured during the first 2 months in captivity. She hated them more than having to watch her brother's head get mounted on a pike. She hated them from the very bottom of her cold, black heart. Twilight, Sombra whispered, reaching up to kiss her once more, just to take her mind off of it. They'll pay for what they've done to you, I can assure you. They will cower at your hooves when they see you flying in with our enemy over Equestria. Or with our army over Equestria. Not enemy, I'm sorry, army. Twilight giggled wickedly. I can't wait, she murmured. The Alicorn then dipped her head down to Sombra's ear and whispered seductively, and it'll be all thanks to you. Okay. Sombra shuddered when he felt her wet tongue gently lick his ear. Stop it! He felt her body begin to heat up, and he growled lustfully. Stop! Twilight laughed in surprise when she was suddenly flipped around and pressed against the mattress on her back. If you even so dare! Sombra hovered over her and smashed his lips against hers in a heated French kiss. Don't you dare. Put it down. Put it down. After breaking the kiss, Sombra stared at his mate, panting softly. She was so beautiful. Gazing at his creation After a full year of training and patience, the results in the end was worth the hard work. She was everything he wanted in a queen. Strong, young, ferocious, and beautiful. Oh, man. He caressed her young, soft body leisurely. Don't you dare. This is practically pedophilia. Moaning quietly when he felt her brush her inner thigh against his hardening member. Don't you dare. I will find you, and I will hurt you. Pressing soft kisses on his chest, unable to fight back his urges any longer, Somber gently gripped Twilight's shoulder and eased himself into the young mare. Ugh! I'm covering up Fluttershy's ears. Groaning in pleasure at the wetness, Twilight made a sharp gasp before moaning softly. Ah! Okay. Just to let you know, if I didn't tell you before, I am a hardcore anti-clopper. And R34 of this show is the worst thing to have ever happened to it. I'm sorry. I know R34 is, if it exists, there's porn of it, no exceptions, but it's just the worst thing to have ever happened to this show. Ugh. Okay. It reminded her of their wedding night, when he first showed her how much he loved her. She was a bit nervous when she saw just how big he was. Ew? Just ew? But he assured her with a few gentle kisses down her jaw. It'll hurt at first, he told her soothingly, but you'll enjoy it in the end, and she did. Ugh. Ugh. Okay. Somber pulled in and out of the young alicorn, growing in pleasure. You just put that away. Put that away. Enjoying her moans and pleas to go faster. Stop! Somber complied, rocking his hips. Just when things were about to escalate, Twilight suddenly had them switch positions. With her sitting on the now surprised unicorn, he stared up at her questionably, but she merely giggled and kissed him softly. Yeah, this is just turning into 50 Shades of Grey. Let me ride you, she whispered before rolling her hips. Oh, ugh. Moaning, Sombra moaned as well, thrusting upwards while Twilight thrusted downwards. Ugh! The unicorn spread his legs wider. The alicorn spread her legs wider to take in more of Sombra. Ugh! Why? Sombra smirked, thinking Twilight had her fun. He had them switch positions once more, thrusting into her as soon as she was flat on her back. Just... Twilight moaned loudly as pleasure coursed through her body. She felt Sombra lick the side of her horn. Yuck. I'm going to come soon, Sombra growled under his breath, feeling close to release. Me too, Twilight panted. Now, I'm not saying that... I'm not giving, hard critiques, but that's the wrong way to spell come, if you're talking in the sex way. The two smashed their lips together, tongues swirling as they reached the climax of their love-making. Sombra pulled his head away, roared with pleasure as he released his seed into the young alicorn. Both crying out each other's name, Sombra fell beside his mate, panting heavily. Just why? Twilight rolled onto her side and laid her head on his heaving chest, draping one foreleg over him as she kissed his chest softly before nuzzling it. "I love you, my sweet Twilight," Somber panted as he wrapped a foreleg around her. Twilight smiled softly. "I love you too," she whispered before blissful sleep claimed both of them. Gag! Just gag! 4 notes. Sorry if that little scene was too descriptive. A fan put, "Glad you liked the description I had for her." I don't know what that's talking about, but a reader named Skeleton That Drink Root Beer said, "That is exactly what I plan on doing," grins evilly. Nightmare Shadow put thanks. And then as a little note, she put, "A YouTuber friend of mine called pikafan003 has taken the time to actually read the first chapter of this fic. Check out his channel sometime. Yes, please. Spread my word to your friends. Please. Spread my word of the Buffalo Army to your friends, so that we may grow in numbers. And we shall eventually take over Gotham City, Batman." Yes. Sorry for the Bane voice, but that's just something I've done for a bit. Chapter 7! Rainbow Dash just needed some time alone to herself. She flew over Ponyville with a rainbow tail behind her as she thought deeply to herself, blindingly dodging anything that was in her way. She finally situated herself on a cloud and sighed depressingly. Despite all of her attempts to try and move on with her life, she just couldn't find herself to let go. "Damn me," she cursed to herself softly. "Rainbow Dash! Ooh, Rainbow Dash!" Pinkie Pie's voice suddenly called from below. Rainbow Dash looked over the edge of the small cloud with a depressed look. She saw the pink earth pony standing just underneath her, grinning widely. "What do you want, Pinkie?" she called monotonously. Pinkie Pie frowned and crossed her front hooves. "Don't talk to me like that, Dashy. I'm just here to try to cheer you up." Rainbow Dash sighed to herself and rubbed the side of her head. "Sorry, Pinkie," she groaned. "I just haven't been able to sleep lately." Pinkie's expression softened as she gave her friend a worried smile. "You want to come down and talk about it with me?" she asked, for once sounding serious. Rainbow Dash shook her head. As much as she would love to talk about her dream, Pinkie Pie just didn't seem like the kind of pony to talk about it with. Of course, she didn't want to hurt her feelings. "Nah, I just need to be by myself for a while, but thanks." "Oh, okay then," Pinkie Pie said before she turned to head back to Ponyville. "Just remember that I'll always be here for you if you need any pony to talk to." Dash smiled softly. "Thanks, Pinkie," she said. As soon as the pink earth pony was out of sight, Rainbow Dash rolled on her back and stared at the endless blue sky. She wondered if Twilight could hear her from where she was. "Oh, Twi," she sighed, closing her eyes to imagine the unicorn was laying right beside her. "I would have anything just to speak to you again. If you could hear me, I just want you to know that I love you. Not as a friend, but something else. I know this may sound awkward, but," she chuckled softly, "we can't handle who we'll fall in love with. Know what I mean? I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared. I was scared how the others would have reacted. I was scared of how Princess Celestia would have reacted. I love you, Twi." Rainbow Dash opened her eyes and turned her head to look beside her. Of course, no pony was there. Her heart sank, but she didn't cry. Instead, she let out a long sigh before she rolled onto her side. She stayed on the cloud for a good 2 hours, moping in her self-pity, thinking to herself, She was soon snapped out of her thoughts when she heard Pinkie Pie frantically calling her name. Rainbow Dash, you have to come down, quick, and to the Ponyville Hospital, ASAP! Rainbow Dash looked over the edge of the cloud and saw the panic in the pink pony's eyes. Why, what's wrong? She asked. Dot, dot, dot. Now this may hurt a bit. Ow! Little Strongheart cried as the doctor applied the alcohol to her scraped knee, tears appearing in the corner of her eyes as she gritted her teeth. There we go, all done, the doctor said before hanging up her knee, or bandaging up her knee. Thanks, the little buffalo murmured. See, that wasn't so hard, Rainbow Dash said to her with an assuring smile. Little Strongheart managed to put up a weak smile in return. So what happened, Strongheart? How did this happen to you? Applejack asked as soon as the doctor left the room. Little Strongheart sniffled. My herd and I were just about to start our great migration when we arrived in Appaloosa for the apple pies. The place was a wreck. Buildings were on fire and everything. What? The ponies cried in unison, Spike almost falling off the stool he was sitting on. Little Strongheart nodded. That wasn't all. The place was overrun with these ponies covered in black armor. They also carried weapons like swords and halberds. They were rounding up some of the citizens into a cart like cattle. But then one of them spotted us, and they attacked. What happened next? Pinkie Pie asked. Little Strongheart swallowed, her body shaking slightly. We tried to fight back, but they were too strong. Chief Thunderhoofs told me to run away and get to another town as fast as I could, so I did, but a group of armored Pegasi chased me down. That's awful, Rarity gasped. Little Strongheart nodded. I suddenly tripped over a rock and fell. I thought they were gonna get me until I saw Dodge Junction ahead. Strangely, I thought that's when they stopped chasing me and flew back to Appaloosa. The ponies there found me and took me here to be treated. You wouldn't have happened to see my cousin in Appaloosa, did you? Applejack asked. Well, technically, Appaloosa was founded by apples, so shouldn't it be a clan that's in Appaloosa, minus the buffalo? I don't know. Strongheart shook her head sadly. I'm sorry, Applejack. I didn't see him there. They must have captured him already. AJ tensed but nodded. Thanks anyway, she said. First the murders of Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon, and now this attack on Appaloosa? What the hay is happening right now? Pinkie Pie cried. Something is going on, Pinkie, Rainbow Dash said, then tightened her jaw and snarled dangerously. And I have a feeling that I might know who's behind all this. Spike swallowed. You don't think... Rainbow Dash turned toward the door. Where are you going, Dash? Applejack asked. I'm catching a train to Appaloosa. I need to see this for myself, Rainbow Dash said before closing the door behind her. Rainbow Dash left the hospital and made her way to the train station without a second thought. When she arrived, she was a bit surprised to find some Canterlot Royal Guard members standing outside the station with a bag possibly containing their armor beside them. Now, she is a Pegasus. She does realize she can just fly there without taking a train. It would be much faster. The trains, I think, were built more so for the Earth ponies and the unicorns, but, you know, that's just my thought. What's happening over here? She asked when she approached one of them. The princess received news about the incident in Appaloosa from Dodge Junction, the stallion replied. She's given us orders to investigate and search for any clue as to who could have been responsible for it. The pink train slowly pulled up in front of the station before opening its doors to the stallions and mare. Rainbow Dash felt a little out of place as she followed the stallions inside. Luckily, they didn't give her any problems. Rainbow Dash mostly kept to herself during the first day of the ride. The following night, she found herself unable to sleep. The train cabin was filled with snores coming from the other ponies, but that wasn't the reason why Rainbow Dash stayed awake. She was busy thinking about everything little Strongheart said. If King Sombra is indeed behind the incident in Appaloosa and the murders of Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon, then they're going to have to find him before he does anything else. Can't sleep? A voice above her asked. What? The white Pegasus that was in the bunk above her gave the mayor a friendly smile. Yeah, I can't sleep either. You could hear the guys at the barracks. Holy Celestia, the stallion chuckled softly. Rainbow Dash couldn't help but make a small giggle. Yeah, well, I can't imagine that with all of them snoring right now. The white Pegasus laughed softly, his long mane, shaded in different shades of brilliant green and blue, hung beside him as he looked over the edge of the bunk. Say, are you part of the guard? I don't think I've ever seen some pony like you around. No, actually, Rainbow Dash replied. I'm just on my way to Appaloosa for personal reasons. Oh? Do you have a relative living there or something? No, a friend of mine has one living there, though. Really? Yeah. What's their name? You ask a lot of questions, don't you? Rainbow Dash frowned at the stallion in annoyance. The stallion, however, just chuckled. I can't help it when I'm curious. It's just a habit I've been trying to break since foalhood. Rainbow Dash's gaze softened. It sort of reminded her of Twilight in a way. Being as smart as she was, she always did have a lot of questions that still remained unanswered. Dash managed to give the stallion a friendly smile. I'm Star Knight, by the way. Star Knight of Rainbow Falls, the stallion said, holding out his hoof for her. Dash. Rainbow Dash, she replied when she... Dash, Rainbow Dash replied when she took... Rainbow Dash of Cloudsdale, took. The two Pegasi shook hooves briefly before pulling away. Well, it's best if we at least try to get some sleep. We have a big day ahead of us tomorrow, Star Knight said before yawning. Rainbow Dash giggled, something she hasn't done in a long while. Yeah, see you in the morning, Star Knight. Same here, Rainbow Dash, the stallion replied with a smile before pulling his head up and laying back in his bunk. It didn't take a while until Rainbow Dash started to hear him snore softly. The blue Pegasus felt her eyes grow heavy, and she rolled on her side and pulled the blanket up closer. It wasn't even a minute before she too fell asleep to the sound of snoring and railroad tracks. Dot, dot, dot. The vibe around Appaloosa was very much different than it was the last time Rainbow Dash came here, and that was nothing but a distant memory now as she stepped off the train and gazed at the destruction that was left behind. Not a living soul had been seen. The guards stepped off the train and examined the carnage with observative eyes. The captain, who was in charge of the squadron, kept a poker face and nodded before turning to his stallions. All right, boys, he said in a stern voice. We're here to investigate. If you find anything that might give us an idea as to who could have been involved, report it back to me immediately. Understood? Yes, sir! The stallions said in unison. Rainbow Dash watched as the small group dispersed to explore the ruins of Appaloosa. She was a bit surprised when she saw Star Knight walking up to her. Boy, he breathed. I've heard of Appaloosa before, but this isn't what I've had in mind. You should have seen it before, Rainbow Dash muttered. It was a nice little town. Both Pegasi walked side by side as they walked by many other guards searching in and out of the ruined and charred buildings. So, what made you decide to join the Royal Guard? Rainbow Dash asked, wanting to break the silence. Well, Star Knight thought for a bit. I don't really know, actually. I just wanted to live a life of adventure. Know what I mean? Rainbow Dash chuckled. Yeah, I hear you, brother. My friends and I used to have a lot of adventures, but not anymore. Dash's voice trailed off softly. Star Knight tilted his head sideways curiously. What happened? He asked. Rainbow Dash sighed heavily. Well, it happened when a friend of mine... Sweet Princess Celestia! The Pegasus screamed in horror when she saw the slaughtered bodies of buffalo lying near what remained of the apple tree farm, blood soaking the light orange sand, making it look pinkish red where the buffaloes laid. Good Celestia, Star Knight gasped. Both Pegasi took a few steps back from the sheer horror that shock they felt. Rainbow Dash felt her stomach churn, and she quickly looked away, coughing and gagging from the foul stench. Who could have done this to them? The blue Pegasi coughed. No clue, Star Knight swallowed. But I have to tell the captain. A few minutes later, the entire squadron gathered near the large corpses. Some were horrified. Others were shocked and flabbergasted. The captain swallowed, his throat dry, but managed to contain his cool and calm composure. The group walked amongst the bodies, and the sound of flies already picking at the bodies filling their ears. Rainbow Dash felt a little sick, and she inched a bit closer to Star Knight. Upon closer inspection, the bodies had either stab wounds or a deep gash running through or down their chest. Rainbow Dash sighed sadly. How was she going to let Little Strongheart, tell Little Strongheart that her entire herd is dead? It was going to break the calf's heart. Sir, an Earth Pony Guard called. What is it? The captain asked as they walked up to the stallion. The pony gestured to the flag that replaced the Appaloosa one. A crimson flag with a black crystal on the center waved in the gusty desert wind, the Obsidian Guard having left their mark. Rainbow Dash's lips curled back into a snarl, and her nostrils flared. King Sombra! She screamed, her enraged voice echoing throughout the town that was completely void of life. On to Chapter 8. And you know what? I might end it off at Chapter 10, so we still got a good while. Green Trees slammed his pickaxe against the hard rock wall, sweat beading his forehead as he took a few seconds to catch his breath. All around him, crystal ponies repeated the same pattern, but none of them dared to stop, even for a 1-minute break. They all knew their king disliked it when they weren't working, under the circumstances of service or severe punishment by the Obsidian Guard. Green Trees swung the pickaxe again, his right ear flickering when he heard hoofsteps coming in his direction. He quickly pulled and swung his pickaxe again as the black armored stallion walked by, a cold, merciless look in their crystal eyes. What had once been friends and neighbors were now transformed into ruthless soldiers to the Dark King, dark armor completely hiding their bodies and clanging each time they moved. The guard walked by, examining each pony to see if they were working. Green Trees felt the other stallion's hot breath brush against his short mane as he looked over his shoulder. The armored stallion gave an approved nod and resumed his inspection. Green Trees sighed a soft sigh of relief as soon as the stallion was further down the tunnel and out of sight. He'd been having to endure this labor for over a year since Sombra had retrieved the Crystal Heart and reclaimed the Crystal Empire. Not only that, he had a mate that is just as sinister as him. As soon as they were sure the guard wouldn't be back for another while, Green Trees and the other ponies with him dropped their pickaxes and huddled together in a small group. Are you guys ready for this? The gray crystal stallion whispered lowly. We've been planning this for months. This could be our one chance in stopping Sombra. What about the Queen? Twilight Spark, Terror, a mare, Amber Leaf asked hesitantly. The stallion, Ash Hooves, sighed gravely. From what we've seen, she's beyond saving. The nicest thing we can do is put her out of her misery. Green Trees raised a hesitant hoof. Are you sure you want to go with this? I mean, it's not going to be easy sneaking into the castle. Plus, this is King Sombra we're talking about, the one who personally snuffed Shining Armor. Ashhoof suddenly narrowed his crystal eyes at the other stallion. Don't tell me you're thinking of backing down now, Green Trees. We've been planning this for months. He then daggered his pale gray eyes into Green Tree's pale yellow eyes, a serious expression of his worn-out face. Do you want to have to work in a mine for the rest of your life while that son of a bitch is busy fucking his wife every other day? I'm sorry. And you? Just stop thinking those thoughts. It's sick. Green Trees tensed a bit and bit his bottom lip. Finally, he shook his head. No, he sighed. He really did miss his freedom. He missed the days where he was able to walk freely without constantly being watched or in chains, my bad. He missed the good old days when King Somber was more of a decent unicorn than a tyrant king. Let's do it then, he said. ... The Earth Pony Stallion grumbled to himself as he made his rounds through the Mine 7 again, clearly bored with having to check on the slaves every 5 hours just to make sure they were behaving. The first section of the tunnel went well. The ponies were doing exactly what they were supposed to. The second section of the tunnel was also doing good. Green Trees and the others waited patiently for their turn, casually swinging their pickaxes like they've been doing for the past year or so. They soon heard the sound of clanging armor, and Green Trees clenched his teeth tightly. The guard entered their part of the tunnel with a fierce yet glazed-over look in his eyes. The stallion passed Grey Hooves. In a quick moment, the crystal pony swung his head back and struck him in the back of the neck. The guard's eyes widened with shock as he let out a surprised gag. The others soon followed, swinging their pickaxes down mercilessly on their former neighbor and friend until they were sure he was dead. It affected them greatly because of the fact that they just murdered one of their own. But this was a cruel world they lived in now. Plus, they weren't the same ponies anymore. All right, one down, Ash Hooves panted as he wiped some blood from his face. Green Trees stared at the dead crystal pony by his hooves, silently envying them for finally being free of Somber's wretched hold. Amberleaf, Ash Hooves, turned to the young mare. Go tell the others. It's time to show King Somber what we're made of. Right, the mare said hesitantly before galloping up the tunnel. Green Trees and the others took the time to wipe off any blood they had on them before picking up their pickaxes and started charging up the tunnel. They soon met up with the other ponies, and together they charged out of the mine, pickaxes raised and ready for battle. As soon as they reached the surface, however, they all came to a skidding stop. Obsidian guards, almost half of the current army, stood waiting for them with their weapons. They surrounded the crystal ponies, blocking off any sort of escape route. The Pegasi and the unicorn crystal ponies, who worked in the mines, had their horn and wings clipped off to prevent any sort of escape or attack, so they immediately lost hope of escape. Standing before them was none other than King Sombra, Twilight Terror, and Blackfire. Sombra chuckled. "Oh, you foolish slaves," he said smoothly. "Did you honestly think you could get away with a rebellion without me finding out?" "How?" Ashhoof snarled, putting up a brave face. That face was quickly replaced with one of sheer shock when Amberleaf emerged from behind the dark unicorn, head lowered and her ears flat against her mane. "Amber?" Green Trees asked shakily, also shocked by this sudden act of betrayal from the young mare. Amberleaf opened her eyes and looked at her former friends. In tears, she said remorsefully, I'm sorry, everyone, but I just had to." "But why?" Ashhoof screamed. "Because there's no way," Amber screamed back, tears flowing down her face as she glared at the others. We can't fight King Somber. We just can't. There's no possible way. Even shining armor or those 6 ponies couldn't stop him. It's hopeless. Just hopeless. Such a good mare, Sombra cooed fondly as he brushed his hoof against the mare's mane. Now, why don't you tell us who the masterminds of this little rebellion are? Amberleaf sniffled and gulped before looking up tearfully. Other crystal ponies looked at her fearfully and anxiously, silently begging her not to tell. Don't tell him, Amber, please, Greentrees thought. Ash Hooves, Greentrees, and Crystal Arrow. The ponies whose names were called closed their eyes and sighed heavily. Step forward, King Sombra commanded. The ponies looked at one another before dropping their only weapons and stood before the Dark King. Putting up brave faces, Sombra nodded and turned to Blackfire. Blackfire, kill them, he ordered without remorse. The Crimson Pegasus nodded before raising his prized weapon, a black halberd he called the Harbinger. Amberleaf desperately wanted to close her eyes or look away, but she knew that the king would be very displeased if she did so. The crystal ponies from the small resistance group and the others watched as Blackfire, he put his name backwards, decapitated Ash Hooves' head cleanly. The head fell to the ground with a hard thump that caused Amber to flinch. Crystal Arrow was next. The stallion bravely closed his eyes and waited for the moment his vision would go permanently black. Like Ash Hooves, his head was sliced right off. And then it was Greentree's turn. He continued to stare at Amber waves, even as Blackfire stood before him with the blade of his halberd resting mere inches from his neck. We wouldn't die hating her. He would choose not to hate her for her betrayal. Instead, he mentally thanked her, for he was finally going to be free from this hellhole. Amberleaf blinked just as the blade ran through the green stallion's neck. She squeaked in terror as she watched his head fall off and roll to the side while his body fell above Ash Hooves. Let this be a reminder to all of you who ever tried to defy the throne, Sombra said gravely. The crystal ponies huddled together in one group and bowed their heads slightly in submission. Sombra then turned to some of the guards and gestured to the ponies. Take them back to the mine and make sure they will work until noon tomorrow. Amber watched quietly as the guards herded her from former friends back into the mine while others took the heads of the bodies of Ash Hooves, Greentrees, and Crystal Arrow. She got up and took a few steps toward the mine, thinking that her duty was done. Not you, Amberleaf, Sombra said in a much more gentler tone. The mare stopped and looked over her shoulder to find both the king and queen smiling at her. It sent shivers down her spine. She stayed still as the black unicorn approached her. She looked into his burning eyes. Was this the same unicorn who'd given her his red scarf? The same unicorn who comforted her? The same unicorn who shared a similar love interest in her while she did in him? Now that's actually a reference to a fan animation I don't remember the name of. I think it was Rise of the Shadow. I don't know. But it's a pretty cool animation where Sombra has to fight his shadow. Anyway, continuing on. No. The Sombra she knew 1,000 years ago was dead, having fallen through an ice-covered lake and drowned by his own shadow. This was a different Sombra. A Sombra she did not recognize one bit. Yet, she helped him. You were wise to alert us a few days prior to this, Sombra praised the young mare. Perhaps you could prove quite more useful than just working in the mines. Amber blinked, her eyes widening in curiosity. ... Are you sure about your decision with her? Twilight asked as they crawled into bed that night. Sombra nodded. Now don't think about it. That's just a sentence. Don't even think about it. Yes, I'm fully confident about my decision of her. Twilight raised her brow curiously before she straddled her husband's lap. "Stop!" Leaning her head down to nuzzle him lovingly, "I saw the way she looked at you," she growled softly. "She better not try anything funny with my king." "Gah! Stop with the spaghetti!" Somber chuckled before he kissed her passionately. "Relax, love. She won't try anything on me. Any pony knows how you get when you're angry." Twilight scoffed in false offense and crossed her forelegs. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It just means you won't be having competition anytime soon." Sombra suddenly grabbed Twilight's waist and flopped places, the young Alicorn laughing in surprise as she was pressed against the mattress before sharing a heated kiss. "Stop!" Now I can imagine this. I'm physically seeing this over the story. And it is disgusting. So just stop. Okay. ... The train ride back from Appaloosa was a quiet one for all of the Royal Guard members, some of which found it hard to sleep that night. Both Rainbow Dash and Star Knight thought it would be the best if they got away from the others and hung out on the end of the train. Dash thought on how she was going to break the news to Little Strongheart when she felt a light tap on her shoulder. She looked up and found Star Knight looking down at her with concerned green eyes. "Are you still troubled about what we saw back there?" he asked gently. Rainbow Dash sighed and buried her face in her hooves. "It's just... I don't know how I'm going to explain this to Little Strongheart. She's all alone now. Doesn't she know another herd that would welcome her?" Rainbow Dash shook her head. "Not that I know of." Star Knight gave his new friend a gentle nudge with his elbow. "Cheer up. You'll think of something. I know you will." Rainbow Dash said nothing in return. Footnote. Okay, this fanfic is sort of taking a different turn. No, I'm not abandoning the original plot. Badass Evil Twilight and King Sombra totally make an excellent couple. I ship them forever. And Disco Light and Flutter Cord. Okay. Disco Light? Really? I know that she passed his friendship test, but really? Green Trees and Ash Hooves are just OCs, while Crystal Arrow and Amber Leaf belong to Hasbro. That they do. Because they were in the original airing of... Well, I shouldn't say original airing because the only episode to be censored was Last Roundup. Anyway, they were in the Season 3 premiere. The idea with Amber Leaf and the other stuff between her and Sombra were inspired by a legit animation on YouTube called A Tale of One Shadow. That's what it was. Look it up sometime because it is really awesome. Happy Easter to all. Time to head on to Chapter 9. Oh, there we go. Warning! Death and bloodshed. Okay. As soon as the train pulled up in Ponyville train station, Rainbow Dash's heart clenched when she spotted Little Strongheart standing among her friends beside the station, or outside the station. Rainbow Dash swallowed dryly, quickly looking away from the windows to sigh heavily. She turned to Star Knight, who gave her a small smile. She managed a small smile back. "While it was really great meeting you," she said. "Same here." Star Knight nodded. "We should hang out again sometime." "Yeah," Rainbow Dash agreed. The train came to a halt, and the doors opened. Rainbow Dash stepped out first and was greeted with a bear hug from Pinkie Pie. "Dashy!" she squealed as she hugged her in an ironclad grip. Rainbow Dash gagged a bit and managed to say, I've only been gone for 2 days, Pinkie." Applejack tapped the pink mare's shoulder a few times. Pinkie Pie, you're gonna suffocate her to death if you don't stop hugging her. That or break her rib cage." Pinkie Pie immediately released Rainbow Dash and giggled playfully. "Sorry," she said, "but this calls for a celebration!" In the blink of an eye, the pink mare speedily brought out a cannon. She pulled the string, and confetti and streamers blew out, raining over them. Rainbow Dash groaned softly and got back on all fours. Yeah, Pinkie's party cannon. I actually don't remember there ever being a string on that. I just remember her just pressing down on it and the streamers and balloons popping out. Anyway. "So, how did it go? What did you see?" Fluttershy asked nervously. "Yeah," Little Strongheart walked up to Rainbow Dash. "Did you find out what happened to my herd?" Rainbow Dash sighed before she gave the buffalo calf a sad smile. "I think it would be best if I tell you someplace private. ... By the time Rainbow Dash had finished, Little Strongheart was crying in Pinkie Pie's arms. Pinkie Pie, too, was crying, their sobs filling the barn in Apple Acres farm. Both Rarity and Fluttershy had shocked expressions on their faces. Spike looked horrified, while Applejack's nostrils flared with rage. "That son of a bitch," she roared, angrily pacing back and forth. "That fucking son of a bitch!" "Applejack," Rainbow Dash snapped. "Language! We have a calf here." AJ narrowed her eyes angrily. "I don't give a two-bit fuck right now. That son of a bitch had his men slaughter an entire herd of good buffalo and destroyed a town my cousin and his friends worked too hard to build. What's worse, I don't even know if my cousin is still alive. I swear, if I see that stallion fucker, I'm gonna tie him to a tree and—" "Stop it, Applejack!" Fluttershy cried. "Just stop it! Can't you see what Somber's trying to do to us? First he took Twilight from us, and now this. Just please, stop!" The yellow Pegasus buried her face in her hooves and proceeded to weep quietly. Applejack's face softened as she started to calm down. She slowly approached the crying Pegasus and gently hugged her. "I'm sorry, Fluttershy," she said sadly. "I'm so sorry. It's just that I don't want to lose any pony else, especially some pony from my family. We're all upset, AJ." No, not Applejack. I am sorry, I'm very dyslexic right now," Rarity said softly. "If only we knew where Sombra is hiding. Celestia and her stallions stallions have been searching all over Equestria for him." "How could he stay hidden so easily?" Spike added. He's a unicorn, that's why," Rainbow Dash groaned. "He knows magic. Plus, he can turn into shadows." Little Strongheart sniffled and gently pushed herself out of Pinkie's forelegs, slowly walking up to Rainbow Dash with wet eyes. "What's going to happen to me then? Where will I go? Is there another herd that would welcome you?" Fluttershy asked after her hug with Applejack. "Yeah, but they're gone for the year," Little Strongheart replied, sniffing. "You can stay here until they return," Applejack offered. "We can't just leave y'all all by yourself out there, especially with that somber bastard at large." Little Strongheart managed to put up a weak but grateful smile toward the mare. "Thank you," she whimpered. "All of you. I'll be forever grateful for this." Flash Sentry, the Pegasus who everyone apparently hates from Equestria Girls. Speaking of everyone hate him, you should go watch the PMV of Beat It, sung by Black Griffin and Michelle Kreber. You should see the PMV of it by Animated James. It's awesome. Anyway, Flash Sentry wouldn't have believed his friend if he hadn't shown their squad the 3 pikes with the heads of the 3 crystal ponies, all of which had their eyes closed and jaws shut, unlike shining armors. The mere thought of seeing the severed heads sent a chill down the young Pegasi's back, and he looked away to catch his breath. "Sweet Celestia," the squad commander breathed as he approached the pikes, jaw tightened as he tried to hold back the urge to scream. "They look recent," he said gravely before looking over his shoulder at his stallions. "We must be getting close." The excitement in the stallions present wasn't hard to notice. A few were grinning while others were busy whispering all kind of possibilities to one another. The commander cleared his throat loudly and called the stallions to be quiet. Okay. It's quite clear that we could have found our first lead in over a year, which is why I'm sending some of you to scout ahead. The rest of us will remain on standby until they return. If they do not return in less than 5 hours, we will march forth. Understood? Yes, sir, the guards said in unison. The commander nodded in approval. Good, he huffed. Flash sentry, Windbreaker, and Storm shall scout ahead, then. Right, Flash sentry said. We won't let you down, sir. We'll be back before you can say... yeah. What? Okay, no. It says, we'll be back before you can sweet Celestia. That's what it says. I don't know what it was originally supposed to say, but... The 3 Pegasi unfolded their wings and took flight, embracing the cold, snowy winds as though it were nothing. Flash Sentry didn't know what to expect beyond these pikes, but it was a clear sign that Sombra and the Obsidian Guard were nearby. The brilliant gambage-colored pony focused his eyes on the shape he noticed in the distance. Guys, he called, I think I see something up ahead. Windbreaker and Storm focused on the shape that was beginning to materialize before their eyes. The outline of a castle embedded in a wall of a mountain. The 3 Pegasi landed behind a ridge just outside. Keeping low, they peeked over the edge and were surprised by what they found. The castle overlooked a large, wide-open mining pit. They managed to spot chained crystal ponies pushing large mining cars filled with red crystals, while others walked in and out of the mine entrances. Sweet Celestia of the sun, Storm whispered in awe. Come on, Flash Sentry whispered. Let's get a closer look. The trio carefully glided down to the lower edge and managed to get a better view of the area. The bottom of the pit was wide and flat, with a carved staircase leading up toward the castle. Barracks were present on both sides. One side had ponies sparring with one another, possibly the training area. Flash Sentry felt his stomach turn by the sight. They found King Somber, all right. Flash slowly trailed his eyes up the stairs and toward the castle balcony overlooking the pit. There he spotted the infamous black unicorn, long mane and fur cape blowing in the mountain wind majestically with his signature grin plastered on his face. He also spotted a slightly smaller form standing by his side. Flash Sentry suddenly felt his heart stop and his breath hitched. The darker lavender alicorn was snuggling up next to the king, armored as well, but without a cape. A smaller crown resembling Sombra's rested snugly on her head, but was surprised him most of all was the biggest surprise of his life when she opened her eyes to reveal dark violet eyes, the same eyes he once saw on a beautiful young unicorn he'd see walking around the halls of Canterlot Castle way back when, but was too shy to even approach her. They may be much darker now, but they were the same violet eyes. Twilight sparkle, he breathed shakily as he gripped the edge of the rock cliff tightly. Twilight ran a few kisses down her king's jaw before nuzzling him, making Flash Sentry feel even more sick. We have to get back to the others ASAP, Windbreaker said. Twilight. Don't you guys see Twilight? What? Storm and Windbreaker said in unison. Flash Sentry lifted a shaky hoof and pointed toward the king and queen. Both ponies' jaws dropped wide open in disbelief. I don't believe, Windbreaker gasped. That traitorous bitch! Storm screamed without thinking, his enraged voice echoing through the entire area, alerting all ponies to their presence. Both Windbreaker and Flash Sentry shot a glare toward their colleague. Sorry, he said while rubbing the back of his neck nervously. Intruders! An Obsidian Guard bellowed. "Stop them!" Somber roared. "Don't let them escape!" 8 to 9 Pegasi obsidian guards spread their wings and quickly took to the skies with their weapons by their sides, all with a look of murder on their faces. Flash Sentry and his colleagues quickly took to the skies as well and flew out of there like a bat out of hell. Flying as fast as they could to escape capture, Flash Sentry fought against the blinding snowstorm that ravaged the mountains, with tears rolling down his eyes, temporarily blinding him. Storm, who wasn't the fastest flyer, felt himself falling back as the wind pressed harder against him, his armor making it heavy to fly on any faster. An obsidian guard caught up to the gray Pegasus and slashed off one of his wings. That's gruesome. Storm threw his head back and screamed in agony when he lost all feeling to his right wing as it disconnected from his body and fell into the white void below them. Storm found himself losing altitude and started a spiral downward with his blood trailing behind him. Another Pegasus guard caught up to him and slashed off the other wing. Ouch! Flash Sentry and Windbreaker listened helplessly to their comrades' horrified and anguished screams as they grew softer and softer until only their breathing was heard. Both Pegasi flew faster, pumping their wings the hardest they've ever done. Windbreaker felt himself grow tired and started to slow down a bit. "Don't you leave me by myself here," Flash Sentry snapped, something he rarely ever did. His eyes then widened in sheer horror when he witnessed a lance suddenly pierce the back of the blue stallion's neck, and exited through his throat. Ugh. Windbreaker's eyes widened in shock as he started to cough up blood. The Pegasus that stabbed him yanked the lance right out, and blood started to gush out. Flash Sentry screamed in horror before snapping his head away and pumped his wings faster. Knowing there was nothing he could do for him now, he didn't bother to look back and watch him be mercilessly stabbed and sliced until he started pummeling to the ground in a trail of blood. Tears blinding his vision, Flash Sentry found it hard to see. He blinked away his tears a few times. His vision cleared a bit, but it was still nothing but a jumbled mess of colors. He just kept flying with his eyes closed, flying until he was sure they weren't following him, flying until he was out of the mountains completely, flying until he fell from exhaustion and crashed just outside of the Crystal Empire, where the other Canterlot guards were at, and rendered unconscious. The platoon he was with, however, were never heard from again. Alright. Little forenote. Well, not forenote, but end note. Ending was rushed, sorry about that. I wanted to get this done before I had to go to bed for school tomorrow. Long story short, Flash Sentry will be in a coma for a while. And, I'm sorry if I'm just, shifting the camera around a little bit. I'm trying to hold my bladder. But we're on chapter 10, and when I'm done with this chapter, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. What seems to be a long chapter. Warning, suggestive themes. Oh god, not more spaghetti. Not more spaghetti. Okay. To say that King Sombra was displeased when he learned that one of the Pegasi from the Royal Guard managed to escape is clearly an understatement. He wasn't displeased, he was pissed. Stomping back and forth in his bedroom while fuming about the possible outcome of the Pegasus reaching Canterlot, and how it could ruin everything he's been planning for since he broke free from his icy prison, Twilight sat quietly on the bed while listening to her husband's ranting and curses. It wasn't something new to her. He would eventually cool off in the end and tuck in for the night. But tonight, however, wouldn't end like that. The Dark Unicorn had been like this since after supper. Even as they changed out of their attire and ranted, Twilight wanted to comfort her husband in any way possible, but was afraid of getting yelled at or harmed, although she knew he wouldn't do that to her, which was why she kept her distance. Somber was huffing by the time he climbed into bed. Twilight opened her mouth to say something, but immediately closed it when she saw the look in his eyes. Sombra paid no attention to his wife and rolled to his side, his back facing the young alicorn. Twilight sighed. "Good night." She sighed softly. Sombra merely grunted softly in return, closing his eyes. Twilight looked away sadly. An idea suddenly clicked in her head that she looked back to her husband. It was risky, but she had to at least try. With hesitation, she bent down and kissed his shoulder softly. When he didn't react violently, she trailed down his arm softly. Sombra opened his eyes when she was halfway and looked over his shoulder slightly. "Twilight," he muttered. "Can you stop? I'm not in the mood tonight." Twilight merely gave him a mischievous giggle and repeated the same action. Sombra narrowed his eyes and rolled onto his back in hopes it would stop the now playful alicorn. He growled softly to himself when she straddled him. "Stop!" "Twilight," he said as calmly as he could without sounding aggressive. "Get off me." Twilight sighed heavily in defeat before she crawled off the unicorn's lap and laid back on her side, back facing Sombra. Sombra's expression softened as he sighed heavily to himself. He rolled onto his right side and draped an arm over the alicorn and pulled her close. "I'm sorry," he murmured as he nuzzled the back of her head. "I know you were only trying to help." "I just hate seeing you angry," Twilight whispered, almost tearfully, gripping the blanket tightly. She felt her husband's hot breath gently caress the fur on her cheek and pressed her back closer to his masculine chest. I know, Sombra whispered, comforting her in a gentle, loving voice. "I'm just stressed out by the fact that the Royal Guard could come marching in any day now," and he held Twilight tightly, almost defensively, as he growled softly, flashing his pure white fangs dangerously. "I don't want to lose you." Twilight smiled softly. She rolled over until her muzzle was mere inches from Sombra's. "You won't lose me," she said softly as she ran a hoof up and down his chest. "They'll die before they even lay a single hoof on me." Sombra chuckled and pressed a loving kiss on Twilight's soft lips. "Stop!" Twilight eagerly pressed back and allowed her husband's tongue to wrap around hers. "Ah!" Moaning in the kiss when she felt him brush his hoof against her flank. "Stop!" "I'll never let them take you," Sombra growled softly after they broke the kiss. However, he then kissed down her neck until he reached a spot on it. He bit down gently, sinking his teeth into her soft flesh and enjoying the sweet, almost sugary taste of her blood. Ugh. Vampirism. Shifting camera. Sorry about that. Just gotta shift a bit. I don't have a positionable webcam. Twilight gasped sharply and wrapped her arms around her husband's neck, moaning rather loudly. She felt his wet tongue gently lick the mark where he kissed it softly. She knew it was going to be there a while, but it didn't matter. She'd been marked by him many times before, but this was a reminder to others that she was his claim. It's practically vampirism. Anyway, Sombra buried his face into her long mane and breathed in a raspberry scent, murmuring loving words and promises that were enough to fill her with confidence and hope towards the future. She smiled tiredly and pressed her face against his neck, her now heavy eyelids closing almost immediately as she fell into a deep sleep. Sombra quickly followed, still holding his beloved queen in his arms. Alright. ... "You gonna be okay by yourself tonight?" Applejack asked the buffalo calf, resting on a pile of pillows with a quilt blanket draped over her body. Little Strongheart adjusted herself slightly before bobbing her head. "Yep, this quilt's quite really comfy, by the way," Strongheart added as she nuzzled the colorful wool. Applejack smiled proudly. "My granny made that quilt," she said while standing on her hind legs, both hooves pressed against her hips in a superhero pose. "Your granny's really talented. Thanks. I'll be sure to tell her that when I see her. Good night," Applejack said with a grin. Just as she turned to leave the barn, she heard Little Strongheart suddenly ask, "Where are your parents?" The Earth Pony just paused where she stood before she slowly looked over her shoulders toward the calf. She rarely ever talked about her parents. Most of the time it was her granny and big brother, Big Macintosh, who took care of her and Apple Bloom. She tried hard not to think about the subject, not since the train accident a few years back. Silence lingered in the air for a few minutes before Strongheart suddenly got the picture and gave Applejack a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't know." A sad smile appeared on Applejack's face, and she gently patted Little Strongheart, said, "It's fine. You didn't even know to begin with. But now I have a question for you. Where are your parents?" During her last encounter with the buffalo, she didn't recall ever seeing Strongheart with her mother or father. Chief Thunderhoof certainly didn't look like her father. "My parents are gone," Strongheart replied with a sad glint in her eyes. "Our herd ran into a nasty dust storm one year, and I got separated from them. We searched everywhere for them, but in the end, we had to accept the inevitable." Now it was Applejack's turn to give a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said. "It's all right. The herd took care of me after that. Or, they did." Strongheart's voice trailed away, and she sniveled. Applejack noticed tears beginning to appear in the calf's eyes. I'm all alone now. My entire herd is gone, and I'm all alone." "Hey, don't you say that. Keep that little chin of yours up," Applejack said sternly, putting up a tough smile. You got me and my gals. We'll take care of you until that herd you told us about returns." Little Strongheart sniffled before a small smile appeared on her face, tears trickling down her cheeks. "Thanks, Applejack. You know how much this means to me." She then paused a bit before looking back up at the mare. "By the way, I hope your cousin's all right." Applejack sighed softly. "Me too, Strongheart." She turned and placed her hoof on the barn door. "Me too." ... There's not much left in this chapter, but... Amberleaf panted softly, feeling the king's gentle caress through her dull golden mane, reaching down toward her flank and stopping just above her cutie mark. "My slave," he murmured languidly, pleasure still lingering inside him from their little event. "Sombra, please," Amberleaf whispered quietly to herself as tears trickled down her cheeks. "I know you're still in there. Please, you have to fight it. I know you can." It seemed as though he didn't hear her, looking behind her ear softly as he continued to caress her mane, nuzzling the back of her head and inhaling her wheat grain scent, savoring it as he purred in pleasure. "My crystal slave," he growled closely in her ear, gently caressing her leg with his own. "Mine, all mine." Amber let out a choked sob. "Sombra, I know you're still in there, somewhere. Please, you have to fight back. Fight it, Sombra." The young mare suddenly felt something wet trail down her neck. She managed to move her head some and was surprised to see tears streaming down the king's normally gloating face. Yet he didn't seem to notice and proceeded to trail down her neck with soft kisses. "Mine," his voice cracked, clearly trying to resist the urge to cry. He looked into her eyes with sad, watery crimson eyes. He saw a look in his eyes that clearly said, "Help me." Mine, Amber. He pressed kisses up to her muzzle. He brushed his lips against hers. "I'm sorry." "Oh, Sombra." Amber wrapped her arms around his neck and hugged him close, breaking down. "I love you too," she sobbed. "I love you so much. I could never hate you when I know you're still in there." Sombra growled softly, but didn't push her away. He instead pressed his face into her mane and allowed the rest of his tears to silently fall. "I love you, Amber," he grunted before falling asleep in her arms. Amber Wave stroked the king's mane and placed a shaky kiss on his forehead before rubbing her cheek on it. "You'll come back to your senses someday, Sombra," she whispered. "Even when that day comes, I will still love you." A tear rolled down Amberleaf's cheek as she slowly closed the trunk containing the red scarf Sombra had given her when they first met 1,000 years past. Despite what he'd done to her that night, it would be the last time he'd force her into his chambers. It was also the last time she saw the remnants of the real Sombra, the Sombra she once knew before the battle on the frozen lake, before a shadow dragged him under while he was helpless to save him. Normally, she would have forbidden to keep any materials of her own. But she was recently moved from slavery and placed into training. She highly doubted it because he remembered her. The reason why she spilled the entire can of beans about the resistance plan is because she knew there was no point in it. Sombra couldn't be defeated. Celestia and Luna were able to imprison him for 1,000 years, but not defeat him. Now no pony can stop him, especially with his queen by his side. Amber couldn't help but feel a bit jealous that he decided to choose a mare he barely even knew than her. But then again, said mare is a unicorn turned alicorn, and the most feared mare in the entire empire. There was no hope of ever changing her back. He'd done a good job in breaking and fixing her. Notice it, fixing. Anyway. She could still remember her anguished screams with each nightmare Sombra shot at her every day. Now the only screams she hears is the ones coming from the ponies captured during the raid of Appaloosa. Tough one he is. Oh, by the way, if you don't know who this he is, I know, because she gives me little spoilers. Aren't I lucky? Anyway, he was too good to be placed into slavery. Sombra wanted young, fit stallions to be placed in his army, whether by will or by force. Of course, there were some who still resisted, which would often end with them suffering the same torture Twilight had to endure for 2 whole months until she finally shattered. This has been going on for 3 weeks for the prisoner. By now, she was used to hearing any sort of scream. Amber slowly locked the buckles over her chest before she pushed it back underneath the bed given to her. It still felt odd sleeping in it, which is why she got up to go out. She got out just to go through some old things she was allowed to retrieve. Sighing softly, she crawled back into the bed and ignored the alien feeling she felt being in it before pulling the covers up. It was going to be a long day tomorrow. Now this one says, "Sorry for the shorter chapter, but better than no chapter. Took me a while to come up for something for this chapter, school's being a pain, especially with an upcoming English assignment that might be assigned over the weekend, and an upcoming history and spelling test too. I'll try to update soon, but thank you for your patience. Well, with that being chapter Tundan, I'm sorry, I'm very dyslexic. Anyway, with chapter 10 done, I'll decide to end this off here, since we're coming up on near, like, an hour and a half. So, leave a like, favorite, comment, please. I want to know what you want me to react to. That's why I made this series. I want to know what you want me to react to. Now, with that being said, please like, comment, favorite, subscribe to join the Buffalo Army. Also, check out CrazyBird101's fanfic if you want to read up ahead of where I left off. So, anyway, this is pikafan003 signing off. I'll see you next time, my Buffalo.